Great. Thank you. Hope you all can hear me okay. Some of you may have seen a similar presentation to what I'm giving today. So this could be a review for folks. I provided something similar down at the Mountainland Area Government Caregiver Conference, and I've also shared this with the Bear River Area Caregiver Conference as well as just recently down at Weber. So if you found this presentation by way of those groups, this might be a review. But what I'm hoping to do today is to talk about some ways that we can manage some of the caregiver stress that some of you may be experiencing or some of your friends and family might be experiencing. And we're going to focus specifically on some skill building today. So not necessarily just describing that everybody is stressed, but really trying to give some hands-on tools for how to live with stress more comfortably. So when we talk about managing caregiver stress, we could really think of it as sort of there's three different ways. There's probably more than three, but there's three main ways that we can try to improve stressful experiences for people. One of the things we can try to do is reduce the source of the stress. So for caregivers, this might look like trying to create an environment that's better suited for their loved one with dementia, maybe something that's less stimulating, a calm environment, a simple environment that they're easy for them to navigate. By doing that, by sort of modifying the environment, we might be able to reduce the source of the stress, meaning that the person with dementia may not have as many significant behavioral symptoms. We've also, of course, can talk about how caregivers can communicate with their loved ones in a way that may reduce their loved one's agitation. So, there's lots of different tools we can have for communicating with people with dementia. We know sometimes that the way we talk to them or the way we approach them can be, can increase agitation or aggression. And likewise, some ways that we approach them can decrease agitation or aggression. And then finally, of course, reducing the source of stress might be something like taking a break. So getting some respite. These are all excellent options for people trying to manage stress. This is not what we're going to talk about today. Okay. So of course, we're not saying that the way that this presentation is going to teach you to live with stress is better than these. These are all viable options for reducing stress, but those are focus of a different webinar, a different time. And we can provide resources in some of those areas as well. When we think about managing stress, a lot of folks think about, as a caregiver, it's their job to manage themselves. So maybe they can't get away from the source of the stress. The person's going to have agitation and behavioral symptoms. They're going to have to learn to live with it. And so some caregivers try to focus on being less reactive to those situations. There's caregivers that will say, I just need to focus on the positive. I need to find the silver lining here. They focus a lot on trying to remain calm. And they may say things like, I just need to not let this bother me so much. These are all sort of natural human instincts to try to get away from our stress, is to say, I don't need it. Let's get away from it. I need to be better. And actually, we don't want to talk about that today either. We're going to talk about something really different. We're going to talk about learning to live with stress more comfortably. So what that means is we're going to teach skills to work on our relationship with our stress, how we react to our own stressful situations, and also focus on doing things in a way that we're proud of. And that includes even in stressful situations. So this is our focus for today, is this last box here. That being said, we're not trying to minimize the role of some of these other categories, particularly the first category. But in terms of being less reactive to stress, if we actually focus on this last box here, we will do a really good job of being less reactive. So we sort of want to start with this approach, and the end result may be that we actually are less reactive. So let's get to it and some of the skills. I want to mention that today our skill building is based in a vetted, validated scientific approach. It's called acceptance and commitment therapy. This is a form of cognitive behavioral therapy. Cognitive behavioral therapy is the most common skill building that you'll get with a therapist. It's the most common type of therapy. And acceptance and commitment therapy is just one sort of facet or one type of cognitive behavioral therapy. So it's not to say this is, going to be different necessarily than what you might learn in a therapy session. And what's really nice about acceptance and commitment therapy, and why I was drawn to using this with caregivers, is because it can focus on what we would consider clinically significant stress or symptoms of anxiety and depression, or other issues, but it also works with just everyday distress. So you don't have to have clinically significant depression or anxiety for these ACT skills to help. And you'll also find that some of the skill building that we're doing today will be directly applicable to caregiver stress, but also really applicable to any stress. So you don't have to apply these to the caregiving stressors that you have. It may be that you want to apply them to work stress or to some other things you're kind of challenged with outside of the caregiving role. And again, the goal of acceptance and commitment therapy is not to make the stress go away. I would love to be able to do that for all dementia caregivers, but given the situation that caregivers are in, it might not be realistic to make stress go away. So this is a great approach for helping people live with their situations more comfortably. And so here's the objectives here. If you remember that last box, what that box was is to learn skills to live with stress more comfortably. And again, these are the two components. We want to work on a relationship with stress, and we want to do things, including stressful things, in ways that we're proud of. So that's your objectives for today's presentation. I'm going to do something a little different though. I'm going to flip the order. So we're going to talk first about doing things, including stressful things, in ways we're proud of. And then we'll finish with working on our relationship with stress. So the flow of this presentation is sort of opposite to what I presented, but I think it helps kind of learn these skills a little more efficiently when we do it in this order. Okay, so this first step, doing things, including stressful things, in ways that we're proud of. We're going to start with this exercise. We're going to talk kind of in general, and then we'll get to sort of specifics where you can think about your own situation. But when we ask people questions like, who do you look up to? They often think about individuals that have certain characteristics that they really value. So this was a Gallup poll done in 1999. I know this is a dated poll, but the reason why they did it in 1999 was because they were asking people about, people over the last century. So over a century of individuals, who do you admire most? And this is what Americans came up with in order. They really appreciated Mother Teresa, Martin Luther King Jr., John F. Kennedy Jr., Albert Einstein, and Helen Keller. And again, one of the things we want to think about is when we think about looking up to individuals, sometimes we want to look up to them because of their successes. Like this person has won a gold medal, or they've made $1 million, before the age of 40, or whatever it is that some accomplishment. But we're not going to focus on accomplishments here. We're going to focus on characteristics. So what was nice about this poll was it asked, who do you most respect, admire? But then why? What are the characteristics that they have? And that's what we want to focus on for this slide, is the characteristics. So this is what came up in this Gallup poll. People appreciated that Mother Teresa was so compassionate. They liked Martin Luther King's nonviolence. John F. Kennedy was hopeful. Albert Einstein for his intelligence, and Helen Keller for being perseverant. So again, thinking about characteristics, not what they accomplished in life. So this being the Gallup poll that you didn't get to fill out, I want you to think about your own life and who you look up to or who you respect. And again, try not to focus on the accomplishments of this individual. Try to focus on the way that they did things. Like, what is it that you really loved about this person? So I really respect so-and-so, you fill in the blank, because they were or because they are blank. What characteristic do they have? So if you've given yourself a minute to think about this, we want to focus on, again, this word here is the characteristic. We want to do this now for ourselves. So when you think about yourself, I want you to think about you being respected for what? What's this piece that you want to be respected for? Or even more importantly, when are you proud of yourself? When you do what? Like when you behave in what kind of way? Here's a list of adjectives you can choose. You could choose something else if you want. But we're going to just do a little exercise, a little skill building with this characteristic that you choose. So you're proud of yourself when you are what? And for the sake of this exercise, just choose one for now. We all probably hope that we're all of these things or many of these things, but we'll just choose one to move forward. So these characteristics, the fill in the blank that I've had there, both for the famous individuals over the century, for somebody in your life that you love and respect, for yourself, these those adjectives that were listed, those are our values. And we don't mean political values, and we don't mean religious values necessarily. We're really focusing on your personal values, the things that you really appreciate in other people. Say something about yourself. And not everybody values the same thing. So we want to think about these values as being a compass. We know that for folks that are out in the woods and they are on a path, if they get off course from that path, they can use a compass to help guide themselves back to where they need to go. And that's what our values are. So we want to think of values as being something we value, of course, but also something that guides our actions or behaviors. And we're going to do just some examples here. So perhaps you are somebody that said you really value compassion. Okay, the value is compassion. And what that means is you might want to think about that value in how you do your actions or behaviors. So you do something compassionately. Maybe you're somebody who really values joy or being joyful. And so you want to do things joyfully. So this is how we take a value and we turn it into something actionable, how it can guide our actions or behaviors, just like a compass. So let's, again, apply this to some scenarios. We often think about people being, doing these big things, these big moments. Maybe it's in the newspaper, maybe you hear about it online. And so some examples of, somebody who has publicly forgiven somebody who has hurt them or hurt a family member. Maybe you found out that somebody has donated funds to build a library in your community. And you think of this as, wow, what a very generous gesture, or what a very forgiving gesture that these people have done. And we certainly can have our values guide us in these really big moments. But those are hard. What we're trying to do right now is focus on the everyday moments. So think about these values as being embedded in your everyday tasks. So here's an example related to caregiving. It could be that you're somebody that values compassion or being compassionate. And so when your spouse who has dementia is trying to talk to you or communicate with you in a way that's difficult, you may want to remind yourself that you want to respond to them compassionately. So that's your compass, compassion. Here's an example outside of caregiving. So it may be that you're waiting in a long line and you're frustrated that the line is so long and it's inefficient and it's taking up so much of your time. Either way, you have to wait in that line. So you could do it resentfully. You could do it impatiently. You can certainly have a vision in your mind of what that might look like, kind of eye rolling and shifting your weight around and big loud sighs and getting frustrated. That would be waiting in line impatiently. But you could also wait in line joyfully. So the exact same action or behavior could be guided by a value. And if you're somebody that values joy, you think about, okay, I'm in this line. I don't want to be here, but I'm going to try to be joyful about this experience. Thinking about caregiving again, maybe you're feeding your loved one. You can envision feeding them impatiently, right? What that might look like. You can also think about feeding them patiently and how that, by adding that value, you're actually sort of adapting the way you're doing that behavior or action. And either way, you're going to be feeding your loved one, and it may be frustrating or difficult, or they might be not interested. But you could do it impatiently or you could do it patiently. Again, so you get to choose which values are important to you and try to embed them in these everyday tasks. The easy ones, the hard ones, all of them, right? So in this, going back to this point here of we want to do things, including stressful things, in ways that we're proud of. We want to just remind ourselves that all of our actions are related to choice. So we may not choose whether we need to do the action or not, right? So you need to feed your loved one. You need to wait in line. You need to respond to your spouse. But what we mean here is you have a choice in how you're doing those behaviors. So you could do them in ways that are aligned with your values, or this visual is sort of showing us, we're sort of pointing towards the compass. We're moving towards our values. Or we may find ourselves doing things not aligned with our values. And certainly that happens often. We realized that as we got through the line, we were very impatient. We're not really proud of ourselves for that. We're realizing that we were short-tempered with a loved one. That can happen. So we don't mean to sort of say you need to be punishing yourself when you find that you've moved away from your values. All we want to do is say, okay, I've noticed, I've moved away from my values, and now I'm going to move towards them. And so it's this sort of shifting options that we have. We have a choice in how we're doing something. And we just want to do this reset or this check to say, am I aligned with my values right now? If I'm not, get out that compass and let's get back on the path. Okay, this, of course, is ideal. We would love to be able to do this all the time. I would love to be able to interact with my teenagers with a smile on my face, passion in my heart, and a lot of patience. But this was a comment that was made by somebody who watched a YouTube video that I put out about helping caregivers, and I loved it. It's perfect, right? It says, not that easy, kid. And that, of course, is right. It's not easy to live according to our values all the time. And so what kind of pushes us away, what moves us in that away move, so we're sort of not behaving in our values, is often our stress, the level of stress. So what we want to do is work on our relationship with our stress to try to get back on track. Okay, I've used this example before in some presentations because it's a really good example of the same behavior given two different contexts. So we're going to say this is the tale of two Beth Fauths. This is me in two different scenarios. And if somebody had dropped in from another planet and taken a peek at me in these two scenarios, they would have seen a very, very different person. So the first one is me driving up to Bear Lake. It's a Sunday afternoon. I've got the music playing. I've got my dogs in the car. I'm singing. I'm patient. I'm peaceful. Somebody can cut me off on the road. It's okay. Go ahead. Right. I'm not worried about the traffic. I'm not worried about the other drivers. There's another scenario where these are true stories. I'm trying to get off I-15. So for people outside of Utah, I-15 is our huge freeway and particularly congested area. When you're trying to get off the freeway, no one lets you over. Everyone is just, you're getting super frustrated that you just can't get off the highway. And so anxiety is up, stress is up, right? So driving is the behavior, two very, very different contexts, two very, very different behaviors from me, right? One is very chill and relaxed. The other is definitely not. So what's the difference in those scenarios? So of course we know that the easy drive to Bear Lake is just not that big a challenge, right? It's delightful, it's beautiful, no worries, as opposed to just the challenges being much higher in the second scenario. But what's also different between these is my experiences with the stress in those moments. So somebody kind of wants to speed up and get around me at Bear Lake, and I'm like, oh, that person's driving too fast, but that's okay, they can get around. And then we've got, the I-15 experience where we've got thoughts like, these people are trying to kill me. I'm in full panic mode. I'm yelling. I have kids in the car. I'm not proud of this. But, this is a truly different emotional experience that I'm having. So we know that there's just different contexts. Certain contexts are going to be more stressful. And in those situations, you're going to have much louder thoughts and much stronger emotions. So let's flip this back to a caregiving scenario, since this is a situation that you all might be in. So we've got this sort of stress meter here, and I'm going to just walk you through some scenarios here. We have how big the challenge is, right? So we know that some challenges with our loved ones are going to be pretty minor, not a big deal. You don't get very heated about it. We also know that there's going to be some challenges that are just big. They are maybe extremely agitated. You've been trying to help them and support them and manage their experiences, and it's just not working. So, that could be what we call just sort of how big the challenge is. We also have our thoughts and emotions that come up with that experience. So we may be very frustrated that nothing is helping our loved one become less agitated. Okay, again, that's a perfectly normal response to a stressful situation. We're also going to talk about sort of this area up here, which is sort of the reserve tank. Like you have, maybe in this scenario, you're about 80% of what you can handle, right? It's high. You're in a highly stressed situation. You do have a little bit left. But what happens a lot of times is that in these stressful situations, we can start to try to get away from this orange feeling. So the emotions and thoughts are there. We don't want them to be there. So we're doing these sort of skills that humans do to try to get away from the stress. The other thing we often do is we start to believe more like they're true. So you may start having a thought like, I'm terrible at this. So this frustration is building to the point where the thoughts are getting louder And they're saying things about you as a person, right? I'm terrible at this. And that's also adding more stress on your stress meter. So on top of managing somebody who's agitated, feeling immensely frustrated, you're now feeling like you're a terrible person. Okay. So we're going to just work through some of these, how we approach stress, how we can work with our relationship with stress in these kinds of scenarios. And remember, the goal here is just this green area. So we recognize that some challenges are bigger. We wish they weren't there, but they are. Okay, so we can't change that. We can't change our exposure to this blue area, to how big the challenge is. We also really can't do much with the thoughts and emotions that pop up. These are perfectly normal responses to stressful scenarios, to feel panic, to feel frustration, to feel anger. A lot of times we think we don't want that around, we don't like it, but in all honesty, we don't have a lot of control over that. Emotions come as they should. Our body's responding to a stressful situation. It's this area up here that we have a little bit more control over, and we'll talk about some scenarios that can kind of help with getting this back down, so we're not adding more stress on top of stress. Okay, so again, I just reversed it now. So you've got how big the challenge is. That, remember, that's the blue area on our last slide, the bottom. We need to acknowledge that dementia symptoms are going to occur, right? So when these situations pop up, and they pop up often, and sometimes they pop up big, we have to understand that they are going to happen in the context of dementia. We are going to have behavioral symptoms. We're going to have situations that are difficult to handle even outside of behaviors. We're just going to have some stress that comes with this role. Doesn't make it easy, but it is going to be there. Okay. We also know that even with our best efforts, our best intentions, and a lot of skills and tools, we're not always able to reduce that challenge. That challenge is something that's going to be there. We also know that thoughts and emotions are going to show up, as they should. So when you are managing something with your loved one and it's difficult, you can say to yourself, I notice that I'm feeling frustrated, or I notice that I'm feeling angry. Acknowledging that that's allowed to be there. That's a perfectly normal, rational response to a challenge. And your body's doing exactly what it's supposed to be doing. It's responding with, thoughts and emotions, as it should. So this is where when we focus on working on our relationship to stress, a lot of it is in this area here. It's how we react to our thoughts and emotions, or how we fight our thoughts and emotions. That's where we actually have a little bit more control. So when we think about, if you're frustrated, and let's say as you're frustrated, you're not behaving in a way aligned with your values, you're kind of throwing things around, stomping around, just a lot of displays of your frustration. And then afterwards you feel guilt. You feel like I shouldn't have behaved that way. I shouldn't have thought about that as this. I should be focusing on the positive, all these things. What we're doing when we feel bad about our thoughts and emotions that come up, we're actually adding more stress on top of the stress, right? We're taking frustration, we're adding guilt. Guilt plus frustration is bigger than just frustration by itself. So if we can start to think of our thoughts and emotions as being allowed to be there, and we don't have to react to them being there, we don't have to get upset that they showed up as they should, then we can actually keep that stress meter down a little bit. We can say we don't need to add guilt on top of the frustration. We're just going to feel the frustration. So sort of being forgiving for the thoughts and emotions that come up, and not trying to feel bad that they showed up. Also knowing that in bigger challenges, our thoughts and emotions are going to be bigger and they're going to be louder. And that doesn't mean that just because they're loud that they're true. So when you have thoughts like, I can't do this anymore, or this will never end. I used the example before of I'm terrible at this. All of these thoughts are allowed to show up because you're in a stressful situation, but we don't have to buy into them. We don't have to believe that they're true. Because if we did buy into them, if we did believe that they're true, again, we're adding more stress on top of our stress. We're making things harder for ourselves by believing that they're true. So just sort of recognizing that in stressful situations, these big thoughts will come and go. That's perfectly acceptable. Even acknowledging that can sort of make those thoughts a little quieter. Like, you're allowed to be here. I'm thinking I'm terrible at this, right? That doesn't mean I am terrible at this. I'm just having the thought that I'm terrible. That takes some of the power away from that thought. And then also something like avoidance. So we don't like to feel frustrated or angry or sad. And we're really good at finding ways to avoid them, avoid these thoughts and emotions as they come up. So we distract ourselves. There's, we tell ourselves we shouldn't feel that way. There's lots of different ways that we respond to difficult thoughts and emotions to try to get away from them. And we do know that this works in the short term. So we know that, avoiding a difficult situation, avoiding the anger or the sadness that pops up, that is a Band-Aid. It's a temporary fix. And that's okay in the short term, right? It's effective. But if we're constantly living with stress and we're constantly avoiding our emotions and our thoughts that are related to the stress, this is actually going to lead to burnout. So you can't possibly continue to say, just smile, just don't be sad right now. Don't be angry right now. That's not a long-term sustainable thing that we can do. And that's how people burn out. So we want to be able to say these, put a smile on your face or try to not be sad. That is a very short-term option. We want to, over the long term, start to recognize that sadness has a right to be there and that anger has a right to be there. And we don't necessarily want to try to avoid them. We just want to recognize them and experience them. So this is a way that when we talk about working on our relationship to stress, this is one of the key ways that we want to learn to live with our stress, is to not make it go away, just be more comfortable with it being around. So things that can help, right, when we're heated, acceptance and commitment therapy includes a lot of mindfulness training. If you've done mindfulness, this is totally compatible with the ACT skills. And you may have some of your own mindfulness techniques that work really well. But one of the things we know is that when people are in stressful situations, they're often really thinking these sort of heavy thoughts about the past or about the future. I try to include a dog in every presentation I give. And so this is why I include this picture here. But if you can see here, we have a dog and let's say their person. The dog is thinking about this exact moment. So the dog is thinking about being there with their person. And the person is thinking ahead, right? They're stressing. They're worried about money. They're worried about maybe their upcoming travel or all the things they have to do, their to-do list, right? So we know that when somebody is in a stressful situation, if they try to focus on the moment and not be focusing on the past or the future, we can often minimize sort of the parameters of that stress just to what's happening in the moment. So again, we're not adding on worry about the future. We're not adding on guilt about the past. In those heated moments, we can just say, okay, what is right in front of me right now? What's the scenario right in front of me? And focusing on the present can sometimes really help lower that reactivity because you're only focusing on the one thing. You're not focusing on the 12 things. So be like the dog in all ways. We want to be compassionate towards our thoughts and emotions. So oftentimes we're really generous and gentle to our friends who are going through something difficult. And they call us and they say, they maybe describe something that's sad and maybe they start crying as they're talking on the phone. And they, often say, I'm so sorry, I'm crying. And most of the time, the first reaction we have towards our friends is to say, it's okay, of course you're crying. Like, this is a sad situation. We're really compassionate towards our friends when they're having difficult emotions. We don't often award ourselves that same compassion. And so just by being compassionate towards the self and saying, I recognize that I'm sad. It's okay to be sad. It's understandable that I'm sad, or it's okay that I was angry. Being compassionate towards those experiences, it can often sort of, again, get rid of that extra stress, just allowing those emotions to be there. We do know, again, mindfulness techniques like breathing exercises can really help lower the heart rate, help focus on the moment, de-escalate a situation that's feeling pretty heated. And again, going back to the first part of our presentation, in the moment, you can think, how am I behaving? Am I behaving according to my values, or am I behaving sort of in these away areas? And we can think, all right, I don't think I've been aligned with my values. I think I've been, as I've been frustrated, I've been acting impatiently, and that's not how I want to behave. That can help you in the moment to sort of say, okay, let's get back on track. Let's focus, let's restart. Let's focus now, leaning in a little bit towards that compass, towards that value, how you want to behave. So we have another exercise here. This is kind of a fun one. It's a nice way to think about not being bossed around by our really loud thoughts or our really big emotions. Okay, so this is called passengers on a bus. This is a metaphor that's used in the acceptance and commitment therapy training. And we want to think about, you are a bus driver and you have this group of people on your bus that are just so disruptive. They're yelling at you. They're telling you you're going the wrong way. They're telling you that you're terrible at your job, right? It's not a great day to be a bus driver, right? You have some options here. So you've got these passengers that are just being, disrespectful and loud. One of your options would be to fight back, right? So you could shout at them. You could tell them, make some threats to them, say, I don't want you here. You got to stop behaving that way. And just getting louder and louder, right? So they're yelling at you, you're yelling back. So this is sort of this idea that I'm going to fight with these thoughts and emotions, or fight with these passengers. We could also listen to them, right? We could say, oh my gosh, you're right. I am going the wrong way. I am terrible at this. Tell me where to go here, right? You could give the passengers all of the power here and listen to them and believe that they're true. And then the third option is that, you're a bus driver and you just happen to have some passengers that you don't love, but you're going to drive the course and you're going to recognize that there's some disruptions. So in choosing these options here, right, this option here of just drive the course and be willing to have these disruptions from time to time, this is a metaphor for our thoughts and emotions. So when our emotions are big and loud and terrible, right, when they're kind of bossing us around and telling us, we're not going to be able to make it and we're not cutting it, we're not cut out for this, all those things, one of the things we can do is just drive the course. We can say those thoughts showed up. I don't like them. I wish they were quieter, but they're not. And I'm just going to continue to do things the way I want to do them, again, according to my values. I have another scenario. This one hits closer to home. This is my kids are in sports. And if you've ever been to youth sports, you know that the parents are obnoxious. And so in this scenario, we're going to say you are a referee. And the parents are screaming at you. Okay, very common. So if you want to see a little bit closer, this is blurry, but I took a picture of this referee's t-shirt and it says, this isn't on ESPN, relax. My favorite ref we've ever had. This was at a soccer game for 5-year-olds. Okay, so, but I mean, the parents were still screaming. So again, you're a ref, the parents are telling you made the wrong call, right? What could you do? You could scream back at them. You could tell them, they're wrong and you need to be louder than them. You need to prove that you're right. Often an ineffective approach for a ref. You could listen to them, right? When they say you made the wrong call, you're like, oh, you're right. I made the wrong call. I'm going to switch that call. Sorry, right? That's not what refs do. Refs make the calls. They say the parents are going to be annoying, but they're going to be there. So I have a job to do. And so again, this is this metaphor of sort of living with difficult experiences, living with stress, is you can still make your call. You can still drive the bus. You can do it in a way that you're proud of, even though it's loud and it's frustrating, right? But we know that fighting back isn't necessarily the right approach, and neither is believing in these loud thoughts and emotions and saying, they're right. I must be terrible at this. So again, we want to try the same approach when we have difficult thoughts or experiences. So again, if you're in a heated moment, if you're feeling like these thoughts and emotions are coming in strong, again, try to visualize the bus or try to visualize the ref. And that's a way to interact with our thoughts and emotions a little differently. There's another exercise that we've taught with caregivers of knowing that when you're living in a difficult situation, you could still do things anyway. Okay, so here's an example. We call this changing a but to an and. Here's an example. I want to exercise, but I'm tired. This probably popped up for most of us in this room. Here's another example. I want to reconcile with somebody I've fought with, but it will be hard. Or I want to go out with my friends, but I'm busy. So we have these scenarios a lot. There's something we want to do, but there's something getting in the way. There's this emotion or this experience that we're having that's sort of putting that roadblock up. And so that's the but. But we can also change the but to an and. So here's the exact same sentences where I want to exercise, but I'm tired becomes I want to exercise and I'm tired. Same thing with reconciling with a friend or going out with the friends, right? I want to go out with my friends and I'm busy. What this is basically saying is that you're allowed to be tired and you're allowed to know that something's hard and you're busy, right? These are the contexts that you're in. You're allowed to have these experiences, these emotions, but you could still try to lean into doing the things that you want to do, even though those experiences are around. And I know it's often easier said than done, right? There are some experiences as a caregiver that you're not going to be able to do because of your caregiving role, but you may find that there are some things that you want to do, and you have some barriers that you've put up with your own emotions about those experiences, right? And you could say, well, I want to do this, but it will be hard, or I want to do this and it will be hard. The and it will be hard approach is kind of giving us permission to go forward with doing the things we want to do anyway, despite a difficult situation. So again, just circling back to the very beginning here, where we talked about doing things, including stressful things, in ways that we're proud of, right? We want to go back to this idea that we have a choice in our actions, and those are related to our values. So this realignment with our everyday tasks in doing things the way we want to do, this is a way that we can kind of interact with our stress a little better and say the stress is here, the stress is not going away, but I still have a choice to behave according to my values, even in a difficult situation. Okay, this is I wanted to just, this is a teaser for acceptance commitment therapy. This is this program that I took some of these examples from. We have an existing program called ACT for Caregivers, so acceptance and commitment therapy for caregiving. It's a 6-session program. Right now, it is not available to the public because as researchers, we're still making sure we have the kinks ironed out, and we study this to make sure that the caregivers' outcomes are moving in the right direction, that they're feeling less stress, that they're feeling a higher quality of life. Our prior studies have been very supportive that this is an effective program, but we are about ready to launch another research study. Again, this would be fully online. You'd be learning a lot more of these types of techniques. If you are interested in this program, this isn't to sign up for the study. This is just so that we contact you when we're ready to start recruiting for the study. We'll say we're ready to launch our Act for Caregivers program. If you'd like to join us, you go through an informed consent process. You get access to the program. We do some surveys to assess how you're doing before and after the program, and you do get compensated for your time. So if this is something you're interested in, we're hoping to launch this research study probably in May or June of this summer, and we'd love to have you guys learning more ACT skills. I've also included my email there if you have questions. I can certainly address questions here, and I will in a second, but if there's things that you just want to ask me directly, you can, that's my direct email, so you could do that. Okay, so I'm going to switch back over to Heather. There will be times for questions, but I know she wants to work through a couple of announcements and things first.
Thanks, Beth. Yeah, so first, if you don't mind completing a brief 1-minute survey, that really helps us as we are running these webinars. You can use the QR code that's there on the screen, or I've also just posted the URL in the chat if you'd like to click it there. We'll give you a minute to do that, and then we'll go to the next slide. I want to emphasize that the survey does have a question asking if there are topics you would like to see covered in future webinars. We really appreciate that feedback. We're in the process of planning out our next series of webinars that would start in the fall, and so that feedback is very valuable to us. All right, and then as I mentioned at the beginning of the webinar today, this is part of our Dementia Resource Ambassadors training program. And so we are already a good way through our webinar series. Crazy how fast time goes. We have 3 more. So the next upcoming webinar is going to be specifically about managing burnout for paid professionals. So we'll have a little bit of overlap with some of the content that we talked about today, but with the focus for specifically the one today was more for informal caregivers. The one next month on April 8th will be geared a little bit more towards individuals working in paid positions supporting individuals with dementia. And then will you click next, Beth, and let the slide? Awesome. So this Dementia Resource Ambassadors program does have several parts. So first we have the webinar series, and then we also have a um, ambassadors, we're calling it a community of practice series, and that is a little bit more focused, smaller groups where we would meet with people on a bi-weekly basis. We are officially going to be starting that in the fall, and we'll be working with individuals throughout the state to really train you specifically on dementia resources and referrals to those high quality validated resources. And so that will start with the Zoom groups in the fall, and then eventually we will be creating an online self-guided program to make this accessible to as many people as possible. Beth, do you have anything you'd like to add on that program?
No, I'll just mention some of you who have attended our prior webinars. We mentioned it was starting in the spring. We actually had some opportunities come up, and we think it's going to be even bigger and better if we do this in the fall. So we want to incorporate some new resources that we have access to. So we will be pushing that series to start in the fall. You can still continue to join us with webinars, and you can still let us know that you want to be notified when that's available to sign up to be an ambassador. Which is this link here. But yeah, it has just, if you're thinking, I thought it was in the spring. Yes, it did say spring in our prior webinars. And so it's now going to be fall, but I think it'll be worth it. I think it'll be it's a good shift. So I think we can do questions, right, Heather?
Yeah, let's move to questions.
So yeah, we certainly appreciate everybody that's attending. We have folks from our acceptance and commitment therapy research team here who can answer some more specific questions about ACT or specific scenarios and how ACT could be applied. We have folks from the Department of Health here. I think, do we have somebody from the Alzheimer's Association here too? I'm not sure if they're on the panel today, but if you have questions about resources from the Alzheimer's Association, we can certainly direct you there as well.
Right. You can feel free to put those questions just in the chat to the hosts and panelists, or you can also use the Q&A function in Zoom. You'll find both of those on that bottom ribbon at the bottom of your screen.
I'll also mention that besides the ACT program, there are other supportive services that are available throughout the state for supporting caregivers. So I don't know if Christy or Heather, if you want to put those in the chat, we have other training available. So if ACT isn't your thing, if you don't feel like this would be a great fit, or if you want something else in addition to some of the training you just received, there's other supportive opportunities. So we also have a clinic here on campus at USU and one down at University of Utah where we can do care consultations, might be a little bit more specific to some of the resources and referrals that you may need in your scenario. And if you have questions about accessing that, you could email the ADRC email that we provided or go to our website and get you access to our clinic. That's available in person and telehealth. So you can be anywhere in the state and you can get free care consultation. What criteria, it's a great question, Kim. What criteria is required to participate in the research study? So right now for this study that we're launching, it's pretty minimal. We need folks to have access to the internet or a mobile device to access the program. They need to be comfortable communicating or learning things in English. We have a little bit of a funny one where we have people have to have a phone number that's connected to a landline or cellular service, so they can't have the like an IP address based phone, and that's a silly one, but that's just because we had the last time we've done our studies, we had some fraud of people trying to just get the money, and that was anyway, it was a good way to rule out individuals that were just fraudulent. So yeah, we can, I think that's it. Let me see. So it's English. Oh, we have a brief question that we ask caregivers about their how stressed they are, and we say, you know, if you have really no stress at all about this caregiving experience, may not be a good program for you. If you have some stress, then you're eligible. So I think that might be all the eligibility criteria. That's a good question, Kim.
I want to quickly just read part of a comment we just got from a participant saying, I participated in an earlier ACT study. It was life-changing. I wasn't sure what to expect when I signed up. So there's a little plug from someone other than us about these programs. And then we have another question that came through that is, I need help communicating as a more pleasant advocate for my mom when I'm angry or disappointed by providers not doing their job.
So yeah, I don't know. Ty is our therapist on the call. I'm just meaning that he may be able to put this at an angle that's a little different from the way that I was teaching it. So I don't know if Ty is available. He may not be, but that's okay. Okay, he may not be available. So just can you just reiterate that question too to make sure that I'm focusing on the right things here?
Yes. So I need help communicating as a more pleasant advocate for my mom when I'm angry or disappointed by providers not doing their job. And then they added later, I have been managing trusts, medical facilities, attorneys, and professionals.
Yeah, so I think, I mean, this is, it's much easier said than done, right? In this moment of, and I don't want to minimize the experiences you're going through, right? So one of the things though, from an ACT approach would be that when those feelings of like anger and frustration come up, when you are legitimately frustrated about the care or the services that professionals are providing, um, is sort of reacting to that anger and that frustration by allowing it to be there, right? So not saying I shouldn't be angry or I hate it when I'm angry and I hate it when I'm frustrated, but to say I recognize that I'm feeling angry, I recognize that I am frustrated. And then again, that compass approach of like, what is a way that you appreciate when people are in difficult situations, like dealing with a professional, for example. What are the values that you have towards that? So maybe you value patience, or maybe you value logic, like, right, just taking a very logical approach. And whatever it is that really kind of connects with you, you would try to embed that in your responses towards the professionals to say, I am angry and I am frustrated. However, I also, I believe in patience and I love it when people are patient. And so I'm going to try to interact with these folks in a way that is attuned to my values, even though I'm also angry and frustrated. So again, these little skills to sort of give value to the way you're feeling. Absolutely understandable that you'd be frustrated in these kinds of contexts. But also making sure that if you are frustrated towards a professional, if you react a lot, if you're, loud and yelling, and you may not feel good about that afterwards. So then you're sort of adding stress on top of stress because you're stressed about your responses. So it would be trying to find this way to say, what is it I want to lean into right now? What's the emotion or the characteristic of that I want to be in a situation like this, and trying to kind of go back and let that compass guide your responses towards individuals. That's a great question.
Thanks, Beth. I have another question for all the panelists, and this is, may we have another example of approaching a person who is reluctant to accept their caregiving role?
Yeah, there could be lots of different scenarios. I was going to say, do you, Christy or Kate, too, others on the call? I don't want to be the only one talking. We have an awesome panel here. So you guys want to jump on that?
Sorry, Kate and I are in the same room, so we had to debate how to do this so you didn't get an echo.
Can you hear me okay? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think one of the first things to consider is not everybody is going to be a very willing caregiver. Everybody has a different expectation of or a view of what caregiving looks like and what they're willing and not willing to do as a caregiver. And so I think having that conversation is going to be very important from the onset, is what tasks is someone willing to do. So for example, if I'm supporting my parents, and I have siblings and we're all, pitching in to help support our parents, what am I willing to do? What is my brother willing to do? What is my sister willing to do? And we all are going to have different expectations of each other, and we're going to have different tasks that we feel comfortable with. And what I'm comfortable doing, I can't have that expectation of, that same expectation of my siblings, because everybody has different, again, things that they're willing to do and not willing to do, or people have different skill sets. And so, my sister, who's actually a registered dietitian, can pitch in more on my parents' nutrition. That's a task I can give to her, whereas I might take some other tasks where I have skills, where kind of I shine. So I think that's when we talk about caregiving in general, I think that's one of the most important places to start is what needs to be done, what support does this person need, who is willing to help, and maybe provide, write down that list of everybody that's willing to help, write down that list of everything that needs to be done, and then ask people to kind of connect themselves to those tasks. If I were to go through and assign people tasks without their input, then folks might get resentful. If they're not picking up the slack, I might get resentful. So I think it's best to have those open conversations of what are you willing to do? What do you have time to do? What, skills do you have that you would like to kind of tackle certain tasks? And I think just being really open about that, that's where I would start. Because then everybody, I think it's a easier way to start from that position than having this expectation that everybody's going to be able to or willing to do all the same things that I am. And then when that person's not willing to do that, then we're resentful, then we're upset, then we're fighting with each other, that kind of thing. So hopefully that helps.
And I want to add from my side. So when I read that question, my first thought was, do they see themselves as a caregiver? And is that the barrier to them, like you being reluctant to accept that caregiving role? And if it's just the title that they're struggling to accept, that's okay. I provided care for years and I was just the granddaughter. I didn't see myself as a caregiver. Now as a professional, I see that. But if the title itself is what's kind of a barrier to someone, then just don't use that title if it makes them feel better, or you can explain what that title actually means, because oftentimes caregivers see themselves as the spouse or the child or the grandchild, and then they start realizing all of the tasks of a caregiver that they're doing, and then that helps them connect the dots to like, oh, I am a caregiver too, but I'm also the daughter. So sometimes that can be a big barrier.
Yeah, just to Kate's point too, I think those are both really good answers. And I would say sometimes when people are reluctant, it's coming from a place that it's scary and it's new. And sometimes when they get their foot in the door and start by doing one task, the one task that they find easy, maybe the one task is to drive somebody, or their one task is to take them for dinner one day a week, or whatever it is, start small. Then we can often see family members start to get more comfortable with it, and then start to identify, okay, this person does need more help. I mean, and my sister can't be the only one doing it. So it doesn't always happen organically like that. But I think that the hardest step is just to sort of get somebody started. And the easiest way to do that is just to say, I understand you can't do this, you can't or don't want to do these tasks, but what is something that you do want to do? And then once they start that process, they can sometimes start to take on a little bit more of a shared role. I think it's intimidating for people to start anything. And so I think that sometimes is a barrier.
And Kate wanted me to unmute for her, but I have one thing I'm going to add first. USU, so the Alzheimer's and Dementia Research Center, they actually have a caregiver clinic. And so if your family's really struggling to figure out how to navigate these caregiving tasks and how to navigate the situation, you can meet with somebody at the caregiver clinic there at USU. We also have other people around the state that can help with that if USU is not an option for you. They do them virtually as well. And you can sit down with a professional and go over those pain points, and they can kind of help you start that discussion, because sometimes not everyone's on the same page as to where your loved one is on their dementia journey. And so some people think they need more help, others think they need less. They'll kind of help you navigate those issues and kind of come up with a plan, which is really helpful. And now I'll turn it over to Kate using my mic. Sorry, guys.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing. Instead of one person in the family trying to be the one to kind of organize everybody else, sometimes that with interpersonal relationships, sometimes that gets a little crazy. So feel free to bring in a professional. Someone mentioned here, like a case management company, the folks at USU at their dementia clinic. When I've sat down with families, sometimes having that person as the professional be the one to kind of navigate those conversations, then the folks in the family kind of hear things a little bit differently than if a sibling were to be the one to present that information. So I absolutely recommend that. A great resource, of course, is the Dementia Caregiver Clinic at USU. If you go to the dementia.utah.gov website that was put in the chat, at the caregiver page specifically, you will find also some guides, some planning guides that can help you get started as a caregiver. So AARP has a great planning guide. There's a planning guide in there from Salt Lake County Aging and Adult Services. So take a look, and this is if you go to that dementia.utah.gov/caregivers, go all the way down, and you'll see where there's a drop down, the downloadable planning guides, I think is what it's called. So snoop all around on that page, and you'll find some great resources there. And then I was going to say one more thing, and I forgot. The area agencies on aging are a great place to also go, where you can get connected to support groups, education programs to learn more about dementia, what to expect for the future. But those support groups are really great also for you to express your frustration among peers who get it. They've been through all of this before. There's no judgment whatsoever. There's just full support. So to be able to vent and ask questions and pick up tips and tricks from others. That's one of the best things about those support groups and education programs.
And the ADRC and us, Kate and myself at the Department of Health and Human Services, we're here to be resources. So when you feel stuck, reach out. We're all happy to help.
Awesome. Well, thank you, everyone. We are at time, so we are going to go ahead and end this webinar. But thank you again, everyone, for joining us. And as a reminder, we'll have the next one on April 8th, which is a Wednesday at 1 p.m. again. So thank you all. Have a great rest of your afternoon.